Hi, I'm Christopher Walker with Closely Observed English, and you are probably studying for the Cambridge C1 Advanced exam, and you'd like to know a little bit more about the speaking paper. Well, you've come to the right place. I'm going to tell you what you need so that you are prepared when you go in that door into the speaking exam room, which I have beautifully recreated for you here with my advanced skills in Microsoft Paint. So the speaking paper lasts for about 15 minutes at C1 advanced level, and you usually share that time with one other candidate. So you go into the exam room just like you would if you've done the B2 first exam. You'll have your mark sheet in your hands, and you'll take a seat. The interlocutor will welcome you, the assessor will nod and then ignore you. Well, not really. They're going to be listening very carefully. The interlocutor will ask you and your partner for your names, and they'll write them down on a piece of paper. And they'll say, "Can I have your mark sheets, please?" Take those and give them to the assessor. And then they'll ask you maybe, where are you from? How long have you been studying English? Are you studying now or working? These are not real questions, so you can give very short answers. It's fine. And you're going to move on to the first task, which is the icebreaker. That's what I call it. And in the icebreaker, you'll get one or two questions, depending on how quickly you answer them. So they're not written in the exam. They will be in the interlocutor's script. They'll choose a couple of questions, probably one for you, one for your partner, another for your partner, another for you. There's only 2 minutes for this whole part, so it goes very quickly. The questions will be about you and about your life, but also maybe a bit hypothetical as well. For example, what would your life be like if you lived in a different country? Something like that. So something for you to dig your teeth into a little bit. So, the way to approach this might be to think about what you already know. Maybe you went on holiday to another country not too long ago. You could say, "Oh, if I lived in England, I suppose my life would be very different because I'd have to get used to driving on the other side of the road." Something like that. This part will go very quickly, and you'll be led straight into part 2, which is the individual long turn. This is where it starts getting a bit complicated. So for the individual long turn, the interlocutor will place a booklet in front of you. It will have 2 questions written at the top. You can see them here. And there will be 3 pictures for you. You're not going to talk about all 3. You're only going to talk about 2 of the pictures, but you have to talk about both pictures that you've chosen and both questions. So that's 4 pieces of information you need to give to the interlocutor or to the assessor to hear. And you've only got 60 seconds. So let's do some maths. That gives you 15 seconds per piece of information. That's not long. So you don't want to waste time. Don't waste time telling the interlocutor which pictures you're going to talk about. Don't waste time describing them, talking about the color of the guy's hat. Remember, you're in the exam room with the person. You have a finger just here. You have the pictures just there. People might choose this way of travel. You're pointing at the picture because, and then what you say next will make it clear which one you've chosen. Or remember the key point here. These pictures are representations of an idea. It's not the picture that matters, it's the idea that matters. Why might people choose to fly? Well, they fly because they want to travel a long distance in a short time. And this is the only way to really do it. Why might people choose to ride a bike through a busy town? Well, they want to avoid the traffic, don't they? So you can start doing that. You don't need to say, in the first picture, I can see. Forget it. 60 seconds is too short. Go straight in. Answer the questions. After a minute, the interlocutor will stop you. Whether you're finished or not, they'll stop you. Don't worry. The interlocutor needs to keep to the timetable. And your partner will get a short question. Which of these forms of transportation would you prefer to use, for example? This question is not written on the paper. They have to listen. Now, if they were paying attention to what you said, they might say, "Oh, like my partner said, I think that this is really good, so I would choose this." If they weren't listening, fine, doesn't really matter. One thing you could do to be a bit sneaky would be to use the word suggest. As my partner suggested. And whether they did it or not, it doesn't really matter. You're saying, oh, they suggested it. You know, reading between the lines of what they said, they definitely suggested it. Anyway, you can choose from any of the pictures to talk about. For this short answer, you've got 30 seconds. If the first person didn't talk about the boats, doesn't matter. You can talk about them now if you want to. And then you swap roles. So now it's candidate B's long turn. 3 pictures. Choose 2 to talk about and answer the 2 questions. And then the first person gets a question to answer. They have about 30 seconds. Right. Okay. So there are 4 parts in the speaking, and we've now looked at the first 2. And so far, you have not talked to your partner. You've been talking to the interlocutor. That changes now. Part 3 is the collaborative task. The interlocutor gives you a new page on the booklet. They establish the context. They say, here are some things people think about before taking a test or exam, and a question for you to discuss. So you get about 10 seconds to look at the paper before you then have to start talking. You have 2 minutes for this part. How useful is it to do these things before a test or exam? How useful is a scale? So you can say very useful, not useful. Go anywhere on that scale. And for each of the 5 points, or as many as you can manage in those 2 minutes, talk about that. Revising material. Oh, this is very useful because, and then talk about that with your partner. Agree with them by saying, yeah, you're right. I also think, and then build on what they said. Disagree them by saying, yes, but, and then show how you disagree. You don't need to say, oh, I totally agree with you. I couldn't agree more. It's not very natural. There are better ways of doing it, more natural ways of doing it that will come more quickly to you. Imagine that you're having this discussion in the classroom without the stress of the exam. So after the 2 minutes, the interlocutor will say, thank you. Now, which of these things do you think people should spend the most time doing before a test or exam? Here you get 1 minute to make a choice between these different options. If you didn't talk about all 5, if you only talked about 2 or 3, that's okay. You can talk about any of the 5 to make this decision. Maybe you and your partner will disagree, so you can have a nice little mini discussion about it. But maybe you'll agree and you'll go straight in and say, oh, revising material is definitely the thing you should do most. And the other person goes, yeah, absolutely, totally. Still got 55 seconds. What do we do? Well, now you can start comparing. So you can say, yeah, I think revising material, you should do that more than resting. I think that's more effective because it's difficult to rest when you know you've got a test coming up. You could say I'm resting, but are you? Maybe you're not. Maybe you're just stressing all the time. So actually spending the time revising would be better. So you can do that sort of comparison. You didn't do that much in the first 2 minutes, so now you have the opportunity to do that. Okay, and then at the end of that minute, time's up. The topic of part 3 becomes the basis for part 4, which is the extended discussion. And this is the last 5 minutes of the test. I mean, that's a third of the test, so it's quite a lot still to go. And here we have questions on this topic. So, for example, some people don't think that examinations are a good test of ability. What do you think? And they could ask, maybe the interlocutor will ask your partner, because in the previous part, you did all the talking, and this is their chance to catch up. Or maybe you talked equally, so they do the hand wavy thing. Talk together. They will draw the conversation along. They'll be like, what do you think? Well, do you agree? Something like that. You don't have to rush here. There isn't a target to reach. You don't have to answer all of the questions. You need to develop your answers with your partner and use the opportunity to show off what you know. Say the things that you can say. So you go through these questions. There will be 4 or 5 available depending on how quickly you do them. If you're struggling for things to say, personalize. Talk about you and how you feel. For example, what might have a negative effect on people's exam performance? You could say, well, for me, I know that worrying about the result really has a negative effect. The more I worry, the worse I seem to do. Yeah, so you're talking about you, not everybody, not some random person on the street. You're talking about you, and you know you better than anyone else. So you can think of something to say there. And then finally, at the end of the 15 minutes, the interlocutor will say those magic words, "Thank you." That is the end of the test. Whew. You stand up and you leave. And then you wait a few months to get the results. So that's the shape of the test. That's what to expect when you go into the exam room. Hopefully that gives you some warning, I suppose, some helps you to prepare mentally for what comes ahead. It's good to know what's expected of you in the exam. And in a future video, I'm going to be talking about the assessment of speaking for the Cambridge exams. And if you'd like to know more about that, then subscribe to the channel. If you're worried about missing the video, click the little notification bell icon so that you get some pop-up saying blah, blah, blah. You know the sort of thing. You're not new to YouTube. And that's it for this one. So until next time, thank you very much and good studies.